lies and deceit, shock and awe. This is an American tale of a farming legend. Howdy everyone, and welcome to Cowlick Nation, the podcast where we look at real-world farming and how it affects the game we love, Farming Simulator. Now watch your step. This here is Cowlick Nation. Howdy everyone, how you doing? I'd like to start this podcast off by making a slight correction. Last week's podcast about the community spotlight, I made an error when it came to stone pickers. Now, I said there is only one type of stone picker, or one brand of stone picker, and that was the Elo. Well, I completely forgot about the Gelman, or however it's pronounced, with its 2 meter and 2.4 meter options and 100 horsepower and 200 horsepower, respectively. I guess I did that because I never used them. So it was one of those things with I seeing them being absolutely useless to me, and I completely messed up and forgot about that. That's my bad. I want to set the record straight. But now, I'd like to go ahead and tell you a little story. Do you have time for a short story, by the way? This short story, it's about an American tale, one that has both shock and awe, but mainly farming legends. This short story starts in Rutland, Vermont, back in February 17th, 1804, where a blacksmith and manufacturer, father of 9, was born. He was the inventor of the first successful commercial steel plow. He is the one and only John Deere. Now, John Deere's father was lost at sea at age 4. It's kind of a weird scenario, so John was actually raised by only his mom. And like a lot of those kids, he had a rough time. He briefly went to college for a little while, and he decided by the time he was age 17, it was time to pick a career. So he decided that he would apprentice, and he apprenticed being a blacksmith under the tutelage of Captain Benjamin Lawrence. He ended up doing that for about 4 years, from 1821 to 1825, and he ended up learning a very valuable skill that would help him on the rest of his life. Now, in 1936, New England, it's in the U.S., it's kind of the upper portion of it, kind of on the East Coast. They had a sudden collapse in their economy, and John decided it was time to go ahead and move and get out. So he ended up moving to Grand Detour, Illinois, where he set up himself a blacksmith shop and started rocking and rolling right away. Now, John, being an inventor and a very intelligent person, he took a look at the plows that were being used out in Illinois. Soil was different than back home. Soil was different from all over the place. Then he was noticing that cast iron plows that were being used out in the fields gave farmers lots of problems. Now, the soil in the Great Plains area was much wetter, much stickier. The rich nutrients in it made it very difficult for farmers to go ahead and use these plows. The farmers actually had to stop every couple feet to pick the dirt off. Could you imagine that? Plowing up 100 acres of field, and you have to stop every couple feet to clean your plow off? My gosh, that's just silly. John Deere thought that was silly too, and he had this idea that if he was to go ahead and have a smooth surface plow, it would make it much easier for that soil just to peel right on off. So John decided that he was going to go ahead and make one. And the very first one that he ended up making was made out of a saw blade. I'm not sure how it all kind of looked and how it went, but because John had been a great blacksmith for quite some time, and he was talking and pitching his idea, hundreds of people actually showed up to see this test out. Guess what? Major success. I know. I'm just as floored as you are. It was a major success. People wanted this John Deere plow. They absolutely loved it. In 1941, 100 plows were being produced every single year. Absolutely amazing. And it got to be so big for John that in 1948, he had to move his shop to Moline, Illinois, which is actually right on the Mississippi River, the mighty Mississippi, if you guys don't mind. And what's cool about the mighty Mississippi is that it gives him power and a route to go ahead and move his stuff up and down the river. That's supplies and that's plows. Getting from point A to point B up and down the Mississippi, pretty darn cool. It got to be to a point where John Deere was actually producing 1,000 plows per year. 1,000 plows in a very short period of time. The plows were so good that they got the nickname the plow that broke the plains, because the plains were full of this sticky dirt that's out there, beaten into submission. And in 1968, Deere and Company was born. You betcha. John Deere got his company up and running, and it was absolutely spectacular. A little while after that ended up happening, he ended up kind of halfway retiring and being elected the mayor of Moline. And on May 17th, 1886, he died. Yes, John Deere. He died at the age of 82. Not one tractor at all. Not one tractor. The company's named after him. John Deere Tractors. For crying out loud. John Deere didn't even make or manufacture or create, however you want to say it, one tractor in his entire life. What the heck gives? But don't worry, guys. Charles Deere, which is John's son, he was involved in this picture too. Don't worry. Calm down here. I'll calm down. Back when John was still alive, though, in 1853, Charles decided that he'd go ahead and join in his pop's adventure making farm equipment. And actually, the Deere and Company, if that's how you want to look at it, the company, they were actually doing more than just plows. They were going ahead and doing wagons. They were producing corn planters, cultivators. They were really branching out into the farming communities, building more equipment. And in 1858, there was a nationwide recession in the U.S. So John, obviously he's still alive at this point, he actually saved the company by going ahead and selling all of his ownership to Charles and his stepson, Christopher Weber. At that time, Charles decided that he was taking over things, or not decided, he just kind of started taking over, managing all these things. Well, John ended up just being president of the company, a figurehead, more or less. And then in 1868, when Deere and Company was founded, Charles actually ended up being one of the original stockholders of the company. John Deere wasn't really involved in it at that point. And because, Charles was a Deere, he pretty much ran the company from that point on. And in the 1890s, John Deere branched out yet again and started selling bicycles. Yes, bicycles. Not a tractor. Bicycles. Which, if you were so fortunate enough to find one of these original wooden bicycles, you could go ahead and sell that thing today for anywhere between $1,800 and $3,000 US. That's pretty crazy. That's a lot just for an old wooden bicycle. But that's not it. Charles's story is not done there. In 1907, he died. No tractors. We've gone through John Deere, we've gone through Charles Deere, and not a single tractor was created by either one of them. I don't know about you guys, but I personally believe that wool has been pulled over my eyes for all these years. I'm not sure if I can sit still and enjoy all this. It's been kind of a roller coaster, if you will. But guys, let's take a second here, kind of look at this, because in 1912, guess what happened? A couple years after Charles died, Tractors. Yes, tractors. The tractor expansion started rocking and rolling. See, you had the International Harvester Company that was out there making these gasoline-powered tractors. And John Deere couldn't just sit by, so they started digging around and experimenting. They actually hired a guy that was in the process of developing a tractor called Dane, and they were rocking and rolling, experimenting with the Dane all-wheeled tractor. Now, it didn't work quite as well. There were other experiments that John Deere was doing during this period of time, trying to figure out the right combination of what's going to work. And the Dane kind of was the culmination of everything that they had been working on. But it wasn't panning out. It just wasn't panning out. The actual CEO at that time really wasn't all that interested. He was not a Deere. He was relative, but he wasn't a Deere. He just did not think that going ahead and dabbling in tractors was the best idea. They were already a very large company, bringing in $4.5 million every single year. Back then, that's a lot of money. Rocking and rolling with their plows, their wagons, their corn planters, and their cultivators. He didn't want to go and do this. It was safe. It was safe. The profits were coming in every single year. But with pressure from the boards, he had to go ahead and do it. He had to start dabbling. And in 1918, John Deere ended up purchasing the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company. And at that point, the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company was already producing their own tractor, the Waterloo Boy tractor, which John Deere ended up continuing to produce at that time, and until 1923, when John Deere actually came out with its own first official model of tractor, the John D. Model D, that Waterloo Boy kept on being made. But that John Deere Model D started something big when it came to tractors and when it came to John Deere. Because in 1927, the first combine harvester was actually produced by John Deere. It was not a self-propelled one, but don't worry about that. It's a start. Because at that time, John Deere was just getting themselves rocking and rolling. Now, guys, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a second here quick and talk to you about the FS Love Spotlight that's shining on Skin Man 90 this month. Guys, if you have the opportunity, go ahead and check out Skin Man 90, rocking and rolling over there on the YouTube, having a good old time. I'll leave his information down below so that you can go ahead and find him, but he has had the FS Love Spotlight shined on him for a darn good reason. He's a heck of a content creator, and I really, really encourage it. One thing that he also likes to do too, and Skin Man decided that he would help me out with something, so here, guys, is this week's sponsor. Hello, sir, how are you doing?
Oh, hi there.
Haha, you look like you are missing something from your life. Do you know what you're missing?
No.
You, my good sir, could use yourself some air.
Some air, you say?
Oh, I say air, you betcha. Do you feel that blowing in your hair?
My word, I do.
Oh my gosh, that is air. It is all around you. And you know what? You can take some air home with you today. Doesn't that sound like a great idea?
That sounds fantastic.
Oh my gosh, I tell you what, here, you can go ahead and take this little sample, this air. I have it in my hand. Don't let it go. Don't let it go.
All right.
Now, don't you feel better after having some air?
I do indeed.
Oh my gosh, I tell you what, everyone out there, go ahead, get yourself some air today, and you can be like Skin Man, rocking and rolling, feeling great. Now, don't you feel just like $1 million?
I do.
Oh my gosh, air, it's what you need. October 29th, 1929. It changed the world. It absolutely crushed everything that we had known, everything that we had loved, everything that this country and this world had gone ahead and built. October 29th, 1929, that was Black Friday. The day that the U.S. stock market collapsed. And at that point, it absolutely destroyed the world's economy, sparking the Great Depression that would last from 1929 all the way up to 1939. During the first couple years of the Great Depression, GDPs throughout the world plummeted. Unemployment skyrocketed. In Germany, unemployment went up 232%. France, 214% up. The UK kind of lucked out. Not really. Their unemployment jumped up 129%. The USA had over 15 million people become unemployed, skyrocketing the unemployment rate 607%. This destroyed everything. During that period of time, farmers, they couldn't afford tractors. They couldn't afford tractors, implements, anything like that they had purchased. Repo men were coming out, taking these tractors away from people, taking the equipment from the farmers. It was an absolutely horrible, horrible time to be a farmer. You had no hope. And for the first couple years of the Great Depression, we didn't really understand it, or I should say, we didn't really understand how bad this was going to be. But as time went on, it made itself apparent. But in 1931, John Deere took on the farmers' debt. They decided that extending the payment plans for these vehicles made the most amount of sense. And not once during the Great Depression did John Deere ever repo or repossess anything. Let me say that again. During the Great Depression, John Deere took on the farmers' debt. They extended the payment plans, and they did not repossess a single implement or tractor. Nothing. At that time, John Deere was actually quoted stating, "At some point, the weather will improve, and you will need your tractor. Pay us when you can." Now, I don't know about you, but I couldn't see a single company in the world doing that today. Imagine that. No, you can't pay us, that's fine. You need this more than us. I just can't see it happening. And you want to know why John Deere brand is so popular and has such a strong following? It started then. Decades later, after all this was going on, if a non-John Deere salesman saw a John Deere sitting at a farm, they wouldn't even bother. They wouldn't even bother to go try and make a sales pitch because they knew there was no chance. John Deere earned the respect of farmers across the entire United States. You can't put a price on that. You wonder why they became so big as they are? You wonder why they have such a following as they do? Look at the game. Look at Farming Simulator. The tractors that the majority of people like to go ahead and use are John Deere. Why is that? There's a big following. They've earned a lot of respect. And it all started way back then when John Deere decided, we're not going to take your tractors because you need to feed the world. You need to go ahead and feed your brothers. You need to feed your sisters. You need to feed your aunts and uncles. You need to be out there using this. Does us no good. It does you good. And like they stated, the weather will improve and you will need your tractor. You can't put a price on that. But before all that ended up starting, in 1928, the third CEO, guys, listen, Charles Deere Wyman, the great-grandson of John Deere himself, became the CEO when we actually had a John Deere in charge when tractors were being made. Come on. We actually had a Deere in charge. I can't believe it. I couldn't believe that John Deere didn't make any tractors. I couldn't believe that his son didn't create any tractors. It took John Deere's great-grandson to be in charge of the company before tractors actually started coming on out. And I tell you what, in my personal opinion, Charles Deere Wyman was probably one of the biggest and most influential CEOs the company had. He was in charge from 1928 to 1955. He actually had several stints in that period of time where he had to step away because he volunteered for the wars. He was in the armed forces and he actually became a colonel at one point. So he had fill-ins temporarily while he was off, going ahead and serving his country. During that time period, the very popular models A and B tractors were out there created. The very first self-propelled harvester, the Model 55, was created under his watch. And the company really started to boom. He actually took stuff and made things happen. A Deere in charge with tractors. I know, I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. But unfortunately, after he passed away, that's when he stepped down from his position as CEO, when he died. It's kind of a natural thing. The company continued its trend up. And in 1958, the Deere and Company, I'm sorry, I love how that sounds, the Deere and Company, they actually changed a little bit. They incorporated themselves as John Deere. And from that point, the company took on the classic name that we all know it as. It had the same logo from early on with the deer and everything. John Deere was the name of it all. But the actual name of the company didn't change to John Deere until 1958. And also in 1958, John Deere Company, or the John Deere Company, was going ahead and noticing some stuff. Their market share was actually starting to dip a little bit. The popularity of John Deere's were not as good and great as they had been. The main reason for that is the technology in their tractors and in their implements was starting to be surpassed. So in 1960, John Deere changed gears fully and started the new power revolution. They came out with their 4010, which was part of the 10 series. The 4010 catapulted John Deere right moving forward as being one of the top manufacturers of farm equipment in the U.S. And 4 years later, in 1964, they actually brought out the 4020, which was the graduation of the 10 series. And that tractor in itself, the 4020, was probably the most popular tractor sold by John Deere ever. And with the 4010, that catapulted them up to one of the top manufacturers in the U.S. The 4020 made them the top manufacturer of all farm equipment in the U.S. One tractor. It wasn't the only tractor that was brought up around that time, but it was one of those ones that was super iconic and just shot them right up to the top. Now I'm going to skip ahead a couple years because in 2016, they actually became the largest manufacturer of agricultural equipment in the entire world. 2016. And at that point, John Deere has gone ahead and produced more than 700 different models of tractors that are out there. It's hard to believe, but every couple of years they want to go ahead and reinvent themselves, so they'll go ahead and change the models. And John Deere is going ahead and they made tractors, front loader attachments, combines, forage harvesters, cotton pickers, sugarcane harvesters, seed drills, planters, field sprayers, telehandlers, construction equipment, forestry equipment, lawnmowers, UTVs, engines, and they actually have contracts with the U.S. government making parts for different vehicles that they have. John Deere is no longer that small company from Moline, Indiana, or even that little company that they bought up in Waterloo, making those little Waterloo boy tractors. John Deere is manufacturing stuff mainly in the US and Canada, but you can find them from Argentina to Australia, India and Israel, the Netherlands and Spain, and a whole bunch of different places in between. John Deere has gone worldwide, and being the number one manufacturer of all agricultural equipment, you can understand why. John Deere has been many things to many people. To me, it has been the tractor of my childhood. I like case tractors. I'm not going to lie. I like case tractors. I like the way they look. I've been able to sit in them. On my fondest memories as a child, I remember sitting on my grandfather's lap on his red International Harvester. And it just brings me back to that. But myself here, every time I close my eyes to imagine a tractor, unfortunately for me, I always see green and yellow. John Deere has been a company that has earned a large following. I was very, very surprised to find out that John Deere actually had not gone ahead and had any Deeres. John Deere didn't create a single tractor. His boy, Charles, didn't even create a single tractor. That blew my mind. It also blew my mind learning that John Deere had stood up for farmers and didn't take any of their vehicles and wanted to see farmers survive the Great Depression. It was something that hit hard, and it earned that respect that you can still feel today. There are certain communities within the United States and even within the world where the only vehicle you will find in the barns and out in the fields are John Deere's. Why is that? Well, that's because great-great-great-grandfather bought himself a John Deere and was taken care of by John Deere. So his son and his son and his son, and now you, are all using John Deere because John Deere stood up for you, stood up for your family. And regardless how I feel about John Deere has been there with the green and yellow and that classic deer jumping. Now, in the past, John Deere, if you remember some of their older logos, the deer is always landing on its front feet. And in 2000, John Deere changed their logo. It hasn't changed very much over the years. There's been a log in there that the deer was jumping over. There was words and phrases that have come and gone. But in the year 2000, John Deere changed its logo for the very first time. Instead of that deer landing on its front feet, it's actually beginning to leap. Because John Deere is leaping towards the future with innovations and technology, from self-driving tractors to manufacturing plants that are completely controlled by robotics. John Deere wants to make sure they're going to be here from now and into the future. Now, I know the debate will continue, and I know all of you playing the game will have your arguments about which tractor brand is best. Your loyalties will stand where they are. But myself, I'm going to keep on rocking and rolling and keeping my eyes to the future to see what comes next. Next with FS and next with John Deere. Because like they say, nothing runs like a deer. Thank you for listening to this episode of Cowlick Nation. Hopefully you'll head on back sometime, and don't worry, we'll have coffee on for you. Thanks for stopping by.